Hi, everybody, and welcome to The Art of Aging, which is part of the Abundant Aging podcast series from United Church Homes. I'm Mike, your host for today, and on this show, we look at what it means to age in America and in other places around the world with positive and empowering conversations that challenge, encourage, and inspire everyone everywhere to age with abundance. And today we are talking about exercise, but more specifically, the power of exercise to impact the health of your brain. You may know about aerobics. You may know about strength and resistance training, but there's another component that's not talked about enough, and that's what we call neuromotor. Neuromotor activity incorporates cognitive and physical stimulants to impact brain health, and it is all part of building a brain-healthy lifestyle, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And we've got a great person all teed up to talk about that, the one and only Ryan Glatt. Welcome, Ryan. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Excited to be here.
Thank you. Ryan's got over a decade of experience in the health and fitness space. He is both a personal trainer and a brain health coach, and he works alongside clinicians and researchers to study the effect of activities and exercise that are designed to stimulate the brain. And he does this at the Pacific Brain Health Center in Santa Monica, California, which is where he's dialing in from very early today, and thank you for doing that as well.
My pleasure.
Ryan's got a bachelor's in exercise science, and he's got a master's in applied neuroscience, as we all do, right? And he's here to share his wisdom, and welcome again. Ryan, before we get into it, I got a lawyer's statement I got to read. Oh, and by the way, for all the listeners, I'm getting over laryngitis, but the grind does not stop at United Church Homes. We are going to move ahead, and we are going to be doing our podcast. So just be patient with me and my unusual voice for today. We are talking about health and exercise, and we're going to be talking about opinions of Ryan, opinions of myself. If you're planning to start or change your health, fitness, or wellness plan, please check with your doctor, medical team, so on before you start. So now that the legalese is out of the way, let's get into a little bit about your background, Ryan. First of all, I mean, why are you so passionate about this world of exercise and brain health?
Yeah, that's a great question. And a lot of my close friends will kind of tell you I can pick one thing to be very obsessive about and be passionate about it. But this is the thing I certainly have stuck with the longest and have seemed to made my lifelong career out of, just because I think neuroscience is endlessly fascinating. And I think there's a really important mission that pulls at both your heartstrings and your brain cells in terms of helping people with their brain health. And so the way I got into this is very serpentine. I started with an interest in animal behavior, just watching like Animal Planet as a kid. I'm like, animals are cool. I want to know how their brains work. And then I just started to I don't know why my parents never questioned that or pushed that further, but they just kind of let me go into this animal behavior and training route. I was applying to a community college in my hometown that had the country's only teaching zoo, which I'm like, oh, it's meant to be, right? And it's because it's a community college, it's a lottery program, so it's not based on merit. I didn't end up getting in, but around the time I applied, I had also started losing a lot of weight kind of in my senior year of high school. I was pretty overweight as a kid. I'm a 90s kid. I was born in 91, so I'm a huge gamer. I wasn't on any sports teams. I was always the kid that finished last in the mile. I probably still am. But I got into health and fitness at a local gym that opened up across from my high school. And as soon as I didn't get into this animal behavior program, I switched to a kinesiology program to kind of get into a little bit of personal training. I'm like, oh, I'd love to help people kind of do what I did, which I think is a very common success story. It's when you experience success in your own thing, you want to help other people do it. And around that time, I jumped into kinesiology. My mother started to experience kidney disease and had a leg amputation, was going through physical therapy. I went to her physical therapy appointment with her. I saw the way this physical therapist worked with her, and he was also training her to transfer weight onto her new prosthetic leg. And the way he was doing that, or one of the ways he was doing that, was using the Nintendo Wii and using the tennis game and the bowling game to try to get her to transfer weight. And I was blown away. I'm like, oh my gosh, using video games to help people move with a purpose in a way that distracts them also with purpose. And so one, she really enjoyed it. And I loved kind of the rapport that therapist had with my mom, who wasn't usually the most health motivated person. And so I set my eyes on physical therapy. And so I got my bachelor's in exercise science. And then similar to the animal program, after I finished the exercise science degree, I applied to a bunch of schools and I didn't get in. I'm like, okay, let me take a gap year. I did some volunteer work in West Africa. I worked at a PT clinic for about a year. And then I got into a school in Scotland for physical therapy, or over there, physiotherapy. I went over there and I had the wrong visa. They put me in an immigration detention jail for 7 days and then deported me back to LA. I said, okay, that wasn't supposed to happen, even though that never happens. So I kept just getting like, I don't know if I believe in like divine intervention, but there's a lot of like
Right.
signs and symptoms like, don't do this, don't do that. I'm like, okay. Um, Retrospectively, it's just my lack of attention to detail and resilience to applying to programs, but it is what it is. So anyhow, I become a massage therapist because I really just wanted to get my hands on people, help them move better. And so I'm a trainer, I'm a massage therapist. And as I'm doing body work and massage on people, I kind of realized that a lot of people get into pain or have trouble getting out of pain or just achieving their health goals because of their behavior. And this kind of brought it back to the animal behavior thing. I'm like, what are people doing that they don't get enough sleep and that affects their back pain, or they're not exercising enough and that affects their knee pain? And so I started to think about the brain, and I just got kind of cerebral with it. I put like little EEGs on people's brains as I was doing body work and stuff like that. I was just like super curious about neuroscience. And then I started to think, I'm like, what creates a healthy brain? And I just dove into that. I said, well, what creates a healthy brain from the lens of what I can help with? I'm not going to be a neurologist or a medical doctor or a physical therapist even. I'm not going to be a clinician of any kind. So how can I, as a health coach, as a personal trainer, and as a body worker, help a person with their brain health? I just went down the rabbit hole. And as I was getting burned out in massage therapy, I was getting more and more interested in neuroscience. And I started to realize that lifestyle and read about that, lifestyle interventions really help with brain health. And then probably it's one of the most important things. I'm like, okay, well, who besides health and fitness professionals can help with lifestyle interventions? And of course, there's many professionals that can, but it kind of clicked for me. I'm like, okay, if exercise is one of the things that's incredibly impactful on brain health, and I am an exercise professional, what can I do to get the thing that is exercise to the outcome that is brain health? And what's missing? And I can say, oh, just eat your vegetables, it's healthy for you. And conversely, I can say, just exercise, it's good for your brain. But that's not really good enough. That's not really specific enough. So I had to try to find a way, like, if someone came to me with the goal of brain health, what would I do differently? And that's where I really started to dive into the literature. And I was reading voraciously. I was trying to study, what are the different effects of different types of exercise variables of intensity, type, duration, what's its effect in different populations, what effects are general, what effects are specific. And as soon as I felt like I had acquired this knowledge, I also started to look into exer-gaming, kind of that Nintendo Wii Dance Dance Revolution. And by the way, as a kid, I also lost weight off Dance Dance Revolution and rehab from a concussion. So another kind of big kind of symbol of exer-gaming incorporated into brain health. And so I started to look at the role of exer-gaming in something called dual tasking, which is the ability to execute both a concurrent cognitive and motor task. And I wanted to incorporate this as an exercise professional. I didn't want to become a therapist. I didn't want to try to implement something too clinical or anything like that. I just wanted to do something from the frame of an exercise professional that was still movement. And then as soon as I figured out that I could incorporate gaming with that, I was all in. I was all in because I'm a huge gamer, still am. And I started to work with kids on the spectrum, persons with Parkinson's, older adults, individuals with dementia. And then about 5 years ago, I heard in my neighborhood there was a brain health center opening up. I happened to get in touch with someone who was going to become the director of research, and they said they wanted to start a brain gym, and here we are.
Yeah, and that's what I want to unpack next, Ryan. This concept of a brain gym. But first of all, I just want to kind of reflect. There's a lot there, but I just love the elements of the story. There was so much there about just your curiosity, your learning by
Yeah,
doing, which is terrific, and then sort of really just breaking apart this idea of lifestyle and behaviors and all that, and through the work that we do at United Church Homes, and really just trying to move the needle on positive outcomes for folks that may have functional limitation, that may have multiple chronics and all that. Engagement is so important, right? I
big
mean,
time.
engagement in the exercise and really just attaching that meaning to the exercise, and that's a big thing to really. I mean, getting people to eat their vegetables, right? I mean, or getting. I like to say nobody takes pills because they like how they
Right.
taste.
Yeah.
So how what is that? So you've really kind of unlocked this thing about motivation, about behaviors, and that's not necessarily as simple to model from a data perspective as a clinical care pathway, right? I mean, human beings and their motivations are very abstract, and it's a lot. It's a lot of art versus science, right? I mean, I don't know what your experience has been really trying to get that to get unlocked.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how you look at it, but health coaching and behavior change is a science, and there's a lot of science to be applied. And to become a health coach, you actually need to be a board certified health coach. There's an organization called the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaches. And you need to take at least a 1 year program and then take a board certification exam, and you will actually get an NPI number. And I think one of the things that they're trying to do is incorporate health coaches into healthcare. And for 4 years, I worked for Providence Health as a health coach, and now working for our foundation just adjacent to it. And so health coaching is kind of getting a big movement. People are taking it more seriously. It's less airy and artsy as people might think it is. And it is a science. And it can be as simple as an individual takes a Mediterranean diet questionnaire and a sleep questionnaire and a physical activity questionnaire. And after 1 week of coaching, 30 minutes or one session per week for 30 minutes for 6 months, you might find that individuals adhere significantly better to those things or improve their adherence to a diet or activity levels much more than people without coaching. And there's plenty of research to support that from a brain health perspective as well. And it kind of makes sense. It's like most of us have some sort of external accountability, and it doesn't need to be this magical insight to get you to do something. But coaching is also not a thing that just gets you to do something. And it's really just understanding people's beliefs. Maybe they don't believe that they can improve their brain with older age, and therefore that belief needs to change with scientific education, or they have a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment. That's a significant perceived health threat, and that increases motivation to then start doing the things they maybe should have been doing long time ago. And that's true for most people. A lot of people may not be as motivated until there's a health scare. That's called the health belief model. And so there's all sorts of scientific evidence to support the basis of behavior change, but also techniques like motivational interviewing. And it's not going to be a good example, but on a scale of 1 to 10, how motivated are you to exercise 5 days a week? On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident do you feel, 10 being the most, that you can exercise 5 days a week? And just getting into that conversation and trying to identify the barriers and understand people's preferences. And I like to argue. That's probably why I'm pursuing a PhD right now. I like to be critical, but I also like to negotiate. And I feel like a lot of health coaching can be just negotiating with people like, oh, you don't like outside? Let's try inside. You don't like online? What about in person? It's just giving people options, kind of like at a restaurant. And I like to say we're increasing the restaurant menu of health options until you find what you like. And that's really all it is in my mind. Of course, it is more complicated than that. It's not the definition of coaching, but that's kind of how I look at it.
But it also has impacts for longevity, Ryan. I'm gonna for the audience and for yourself, we will have some at least at this point in June 2023. We're gonna have some upcoming episodes with Dr. Tracy Gendron, who's
Hmm.
chair of the gerontology department at Virginia Commonwealth, award-winning author. But in conversations with her, one's own attitude about what you can accomplish for you
Hmm.
as you age, and your belief in basically rolling with your evolving functional needs and all the rest of it. Your attitude
Yeah.
actually lends itself to greater
Yeah.
longevity. You had, I think, on average 7 years to your life with just the sort of the right mindset and behavioral attitudes about what's healthy for you as you
Yeah,
age.
positive age-related beliefs are huge, even for reducing dementia risk. I think for the brain, especially, people are really don't understand the brain as well as they could or should, and there's a lot of myths about the brain. Things like, "Oh, my brain cannot change with age." That's not an accurate belief, but if you truly believe that, of course, you're not going to try things that you believe could do that or are told that could do
Right,
that. So
right.
that makes
You,
sense.
you, you create your own barrier,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. And what she was also saying was that this actually, just going back to the idea of mild cognitive attitude and belief, can actually alleviate mild cognitive symptoms. I don't know if that's something you've encountered, or just basically just the connection between, I don't know, brain healthy lifestyles, or the right attitudes, and the idea of the mild cognitive symptoms. I don't know
Yeah,
what.
no, there has been some research that demonstrates individuals with positive age-related beliefs have a reduced dementia risk compared to those with negative age-related beliefs. Now, I don't think just changing the belief itself will create the outcome, but if the belief leads to the behaviors that are lifestyle behaviors that are proven to help with the outcome, whatever that might be, that's something that I would definitely vouch for.
And that's part of the health belief model I think you were talking about
It can
before.
be, yeah.
But we, can be sure. Not to put words in your mouth, so
No,
just, yeah,
that's okay.
please.
No, this stuff is detailed and confusing for me too.
Yeah. But it's just fascinating. So, but look, we when we were talking, we were prepping. The concept of a brain gym came
Yeah.
up. And can you explain to me what a brain gym is?
Yeah, so it's not a super original concept, but it is a rare concept. So exer-gaming, which is active video games like the Nintendo Wii, which I think was a really big hit and still is in many ways among older adults and intergenerationally, and things like Dance Dance Revolution or the Xbox or Microsoft Kinect. These things, especially in the early 2000s and late 90s, were extremely popular. And now we have things like the Nintendo Switch. We have the Oculus or the Meta Quest with virtual reality movement games, augmented reality with phones and screens, and just gaming in general. I mean, people are interested in gaming in general, especially for brain health. And so, exergaming, this active gaming, this concept has been studied for quite a while in a variety of populations for a variety of different outcomes, from everything from knee rehabilitation to chronic lower back pain to older adults with balance issues to cognitive issues. And so, one of the things I really got into was a lot of this research demonstrating that there can be cognitive benefits as well as physical benefits to exergaming. And so, for me, a concept of a brain gym, it can be in a community or a clinical setting. In our sense, it's in a clinical setting. But we have people from the community coming to work with me, in that I'm like a brain-based personal trainer. But we also have physical therapists that work in the same space, and that's the clinical side. And so it's a space that has a variety of exer games, anything from virtual reality headsets to brain training boards and screens and lights and things of that regard to get people moving and thinking at the same time. In some research, they call it a clinical arcade, where all the therapy or the exercise or the intervention is gamified, and you accomplish the exercise of the brain training through the lens of a game. That's the main idea. Now, I mentioned dual tasking earlier, which is the execution of a simultaneous cognitive and motor task. The most common example is like counting backwards while walking. That's one example of probably 50 different tasks mentally we could give somebody. But before I had technology at my disposal, I was using cones and dots with letters and numbers on the ground, and my own interaction with people and apps to create kind of a low tech, low budget version of the high tech, high budget version that we have now. And so anyone can do this. And I have a online course called the Brain Health Trainer course for fitness professionals and rehab professionals to train people how to do this. And we've had about 3,000 people go through this course, mostly personal trainers that work with older adults, to incorporate this in a low budget, kind of no tech version using just common fitness equipment or speed, agility, quickness equipment. So it kind of can go from low tech to high tech in that way. And the brain gym concept is kind of like mid tech to high tech. And there's many kind of interested parties, from hospitals to senior centers to senior living communities, that are very interested in kind of incorporating this concept. So I really enjoy it because, like I said, I'm a gamer and I love like having people who maybe are my parents' age or my grandparents' age, who always as a kid they just told me, "Oh, you play too many video games," and kind of looking down, "Oh, you do," and now I'm like, look who's playing
Yeah,
now. So
I know. It turns out you can spend your whole life playing video games, right? I mean, I remember, gosh, when I was on with with my systems back in the day. And I'm still a gamer now. My son, we enjoy it, and I think this is why I love Orange Theory so much when I go and other
Yeah.
things. I love the gamification component of
Hmm.
this. Just because it's just more data, more stimulation, more ways to kind of measure yourself and to have fun. That's the
Hmm.
thing, to have fun too. And so when we look at sort of the world of exercise now, Ryan, we can think of our resistance training, our strength training. We can think about aerobic exercise or
Yeah.
high intensity, and now we're talking about neuromotor, right? This would this be neuromotor
It
components
would
of
be.
exercise?
Yeah,
What you're
that's a
describing?
great point. And it doesn't mean that your heart rate can't get up or your muscles can't be challenged, but neuromotor is a category of exercise that isn't new. It's been there the whole time, but people haven't really talked about it or paid enough attention to it. Um, if you read the physical activity guidelines for Americans, which is like disseminated everywhere, including in medicine, it's that 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity per week. And they're kind of really hinting at aerobic, like that's mostly aerobic. And when we look at the aerobics revolution, of course, there's a lot of research around that. And a lot of people still believe, especially older adults who lived through that period, because I sure didn't, that that is the main way to exercise. That's what exercise means, is getting your heart rate up. And that's not necessarily the full story here. Of course, that's very important and it does have significant brain health benefits, but there's a lot more research now showing the brain benefits of strength training as well. Well, it doesn't just have to be
Okay.
something where you're doing a bicep curl on a machine. It could be a functional movement where you have weights in your hand and you're lunging in different directions and it's complex and it's a skill.
Yeah, so that's what I would love to unpack here, Ryan, and is just this idea of incorporating sort of a neuromotor element within your exercise plan. And one of the things that I've heard about, you being, coming out of the physical therapy world, of the training world, and all that, is that it is you've got let's say if you're doing physical therapy or
Hmm.
rehabilitative therapy, you've got the environment of a rehab center and
Hmm.
those cues and the devices and the cup stacking and the pedal wheels and all that, but it's not really associating the movement and the exercise with something that may be more that you're used to in your environment, right? So, and when I think about what comes into my mind with neuromotor and strength training and how it works both ways, it's just things that offer coordination or offer
Correct.
balance. It's kind of like the wood chopper movement, if you're actually chopping, or things to help with your golf swing, or something that really is neuromotor putting kind of like a practical real life example into it, or is it more abstract than that?
This is a good point. I think what you're really getting at in a way is saliency, which is like, is it meaningful to the individual, but also transfer? Like, does it transfer to real life?
That's the thing, because the critique that I've heard about video games and things like that are meant for brain stimulation, and believe me, there's a lot of snake oil out there, and I can remember
Hmm.
the luminosity thing and all that.
Hmm.
But then I also remember, there's researchers like Adam Gazzaley in San Francisco that's done some work with his lab to actually have FDA approved gaming. But and what I understood that what it has to overcome is this nature of I can do an activity with a gamification element of it, but I get really good at doing that activity. But is that transferable to other areas of my life?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So before I get to the far transfer conversation, which is probably one of the most important conversations we could have, I just want to further define neuromotor for people. So, you kind of talked about things like the transverse plane and rotational movements. And so, neuromotor can be anything that just requires a little bit more cognitive engagement and coordinative activities. That could be a balance exercise, that could be a transverse plane exercise, that could be a skillful exercise, but neuromotor exercises are likely going to be found naturalistically in activities like sports, dance, martial arts. In a subcategory of neuromotor training is mind body exercise, Tai Chi, Qigong, Pilates, and yoga. And so neuromotor exercise is those categories. And when we list those, are like, oh, of course, that makes sense. They just have their home under this category. Even dual tasking and exer-gaming is kind of its own subcategory underneath neuromotor exercise. Now, if you play a sport or you dance in some way, you can acknowledge that there can be a lot of cardiovascular demand and benefit. Even in Tai Chi and yoga, there can be cardiovascular demand and benefit. And so it doesn't have to be specifically just I'm on the treadmill for this period of time, and there's nothing wrong with that per se. But as people look to improve their, implement socialization and implement motor learning and skill learning and cognitive engagement and dynamic balance, especially when they're under distraction, because nobody falls when they're focused, right? So nobody falls when they're protecting themselves against a fall. They fall when they're distracted typically. And so I think neuromotor exercise is a great medium to address a lot of that. And I don't think a lot of people purposely incorporate that into an exercise program because they don't really know how it fits and they may not know the specific benefits. Furthermore, we talked about skill, and you mentioned like the movement of a golf club. And while that's certainly core native, that's what we call closed skill, meaning you know what's going to happen and when. It's kind of like walking and cycling. But open skill is something like ping pong, where if you're playing a game of ping pong, you don't know what's
Oh,
going to happen and when. So you have this kind of spectrum of chaotic versus known outcomes. And the chaotic outcomes, the open skill exercise, can improve certain aspects of cognition compared to closed skill. Now, it doesn't mean open is better than closed skill, but they're unique kind of brain exercise ingredients that we want to incorporate. And a lot of people are missing that open skill cognitive demand. And so when we look at dance, if I'm rehearsing a choreography, that's closed skill because I know what's supposed to happen as I'm learning it. But then when I put the dance together and I don't know what to expect, it becomes more open skill. Golf is going to remain closed skill, but still has cognitive demands, and there's unpredictable elements of it, of course. But things like racket sports, especially my favorite, which is ping pong, that's going to have a lot of chaos, a lot of unpredictability. Unless you're just
yes.
hitting forehand, that's kind of more closed skill. But then as you're playing a game, that's more open skill. And there can be a lot of physical and cognitive demand and enjoyment associated with that unpredictability. So it's really that skill learning and that unpredictability, that randomness, which a lot of life can throw at you, that I think neuromotor exercise really has a home with.
And just this strikes me too. My son's been doing karate for years. I used to be in martial arts, and the components of learning a martial art includes what we call our kata or our forms, where we're going to be practicing movement and displaying, strength in a punch or a kick
Hmm.
or a jump or what have you. And then you have the sparring part of it, and it almost seems to me that's a good example for
Open
just
skill.
just
Yeah, that would be
just
more open skill.
both open and closed skills and kind of the same body of
Yeah,
practice.
that's correct. And a lot of research shows that these activities can improve cognition, it can improve things like balance. And then you had a great question, which is, does it transfer to the real world? Well, if I'm training ping pong, do I catch are my reflexes faster? Do I catch something that falls? Or and I've certainly felt that. Um, if I improve my balance during a Tai Chi class, does that transfer to my balance when walking? And those things have been shown to occur. There's physical and cognitive and mental health and cardiac benefits associated with a whole host of different exercises. And the way it shows up in real life, well, you can measure far transfer. There's different outcome measures that simulate buying or refilling medications online or going to the ATM. But there's also just questionnaires that uh, kind of assess people's subjective cognition. Is word finding easier for you in everyday life in a conversation? Do you feel like it's easier to walk? Is it easier to reach up and get those groceries? And even if we don't assess that far transfer, or even if you notice a far transfer, it's okay that that thing that you're doing has cognitive and physical benefits and doesn't help you with the ATM. That's okay. You could still improve your cognitive functions and physical functions and just stay in good mental and physical shape and be stimulated. That's okay too.
Yeah, and that was one of the questions too, because how do you know if you're making progress? And I think going back to the start of the conversation about positive mind state, association with longevity, feeling that. I mean, you just feel good while doing it, and I think that's terrific. But if you're, I know for me, it took a couple of tries at different types of exercise programs to really understand one that, first of all, that I felt gave me a good mix of the aerobic and strength training and some
Hmm.
element of maybe gamification or challenge or what have you. I think I still need to work on that.
Hmm.
But for, a listener who may be saying, look, you've opened up my eyes to a lot of possibilities of incorporating a neuromotor component to my exercise program,
Hmm.
whether it be Tai Chi or Qigong or martial arts or ping pong or whatever it might be, just the elements of, that, those things that can stimulate the brain.
Hmm.
How do people just land on the right thing for them? What have you seen?
It's a great question. I think there's several ways to look at this. I think the common thing that people say is, "Oh, just find something you enjoy and don't worry about anything else." And that can be helpful, but that's also not the only thing that or the most important thing. A lot of people are really hesitant to get into a neuromotor exercise because they don't think they'll be good at it. And to that I say exactly. Exactly. Like
Okay.
your purpose in that activity is to develop a skill. The first stage of skill learning in any capacity is the cognitive stage of motor learning, which is awkward and frustrating and cognitively demanding. And to that I say exactly. It's supposed to be cognitively demanding. If it wasn't, it may not be challenging or helpful for your brain. And so a lot of people just need to get past this first step of embarrassment. I say the goal is not
Yes.
to be good at it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be recommending it for you. The goal is to challenge your brain. And so if someone has, as an example, a dynamic balance problem, stepping in multiple directions and maintaining balance, and they have an issue of, say, short term memory, keeping track of steps, why wouldn't I recommend dance choreography of some kind? Or a dance class, which will include choreography of some kind. And if that person says, "Oh, I'm not a dancer," I say, exactly. But you would never say someone is a weak person. They just don't do strength training. You're not a clumsy person. You just don't do neuromotor training, and so, or at least enough of it in this way. And so, but then I'm not, if they're like, I'm just not going to do it, I'm like, cool. What about ping pong? Oh, I love ping pong. I haven't played that in years. I used to play it with my dad. And so we're looking for that thing that sparks something. Now, not every
Yes.
single person will have that, but you're going to find something out of the long menu of every possible sport, every possible dance, every possible martial art, and every possible mind body exercise. You will find something. For me, it was an active video game because I didn't play sports growing up. It's only recently that I've really gotten into ping pong. Recently. So for me, it was I used video games as my escape. Someone made a video game into an exercise thing. I'm like, yep, that's something I would do. And so everyone's got these preferences. And within these preferences is experiences and beliefs. And just kind of how we talked about behavior change, you got to have the same considerations there. You have to find something that you'd be open to and motivated to try. The health belief needs to be there that it can be helpful. And usually, not always, but usually these neuromotor activities are very social, and so there's external accountability built into that. Sometimes there's a dark side like
That's the
embarrassment.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how
Yeah,
I would
yeah, because
start to
I
approach
mean,
it.
I can't exercise on my own. I need a group to be around me, so I feel like I need, to be
You're
held
externally
accountable a little
accountable.
bit
You're
more.
externally accountable. And
Yes.
I don't want to say people have it tight, but usually there's those people, there's external accountability and internal accountability. And if you're externally accountable, you usually need some external force like a game or a class or a trainer or something like that to get you going. And that's okay. A lot of people think that's like a component of their personality, like laziness, or, oh, I'm just not
Hmm.
motivated enough. And neither of those things can be true. And so I work with a lot of older adults and their spousal caregivers, like, oh, he's just lazy. He won't do the treadmills. Like, no, he just needs external accountability. He has none. Right. And so
Wow.
incorporating that can help. And it's not a personal, like, part of the thing about health coaching is like, I'm not going to change you as a person. That's what's unique. I just need to understand you as a person well enough to give you something you're going to do, or more likely to do. And then with internal people who are more internally accountable, these are the people that externally accountable people like you and I probably hate, that just wake up at 4 a.m. every day and go running and nobody tells them forever. And I'm just like, nope, not me. But that's okay. That's their thing. And sometimes I'll give people the the plan. I say, this is the plan. You need to have neuromotor training twice a week and you need to add resistance training twice a week. And they're like, yes, sir. And then 6 months later, they've been doing it 100%. So everyone's different. And there's a lot of different health coaching variables to consider, but and human behavior can be complicated. But there's definitely both internal and external accountability. And if someone's struggling to incorporate someone, I'm like, just look at the accountability system. Maybe it's not the right accountability system. Maybe it's they're shamed and punished every time they don't do it. That's not fun.
Right.
That's not fun. That's
Right.
just negative reinforcement. That's yelling or hitting the dog when it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. So positive reinforcement, having the right accountability system, and really making sure that people are doing something that they're interested in. And it doesn't have to mean that they thoroughly enjoy it. Because if you've never played ping pong, and then I ask you, do you like ping pong? And you're like, I've never played ping pong. And you're like, well, you should do something you like. Well, then we've hit a roadblock, haven't we? Because you don't have any experience in that thing to know that you or what if you've gone to the gym? I'm telling you to go to the gym, and you had one negative experience at the gym. I said, do you like the gym? And you're like, well, according to my experiences, no. It's like, well, do we give up because you don't like the gym, or do we, just like going to a different restaurant or the same restaurant and ordering something different? Try again. And I know that sounds obvious, but it's often what needs to be talked about, and it's just not.
Right. 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 So I just marked this down. Positive reinforcement with the right accountability system and doing something you enjoy. I think that's terrific.
Yeah.
Ryan, we're going to move to the end of the podcast, but first of all, before we do that, can you tell people where they can find you?
Um, yeah, so I don't know if I'm listed in the local phone books anymore. But I think that was a bad joke. I apologize. But people can find me if they Google me, Ryan Glatt, Glatt. They can usually find the my profile on the Pacific Neuroscience Institute Foundation website. I also have, like I said, a course called the Brain Health Trainer website, which is brainhealthtrainer.com for those that are interested in professional education. And I'm on LinkedIn as well as social media.
Awesome. Brain health. Okay, so brain health, I'm writing it down. Brainhealthtrainer.com.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so we always ask our guests 3 questions at the end of every podcast. Want to ask those questions of
Cool.
you. I think we did this in prep, but it's all about sort of your perceptions on aging. So would that be okay with you?
Absolutely. Yes.
Awesome. Okay, question number 1. When you think about how you've aged, what do you think has changed about you or grown with you that you really like about yourself?
That's an excellent question. Well, as I've aged, the thing that I've grown with that I've started to really like about myself is my passion for learning. And I found that that is kind of something that's not changed. If anything, it's increased. But it's also something that, like, I can relate to with my clients who are older adults themselves. Is that there's also a passion for learning. And when I work with like a 96-year-old psychologist who's retired with cognitive impairment, and she has a passion for learning at that age, I'm just like, yep, this probably doesn't go anywhere. It won't go away.
Got it. Okay, question number 2. What has surprised you the most about yourself as you aged?
Um, my desire for simplicity, especially when it comes to health and well-being, having studied it for so long, um, I feel like in the beginning and the middle, it got really complicated and nuanced, and as things go on, it's gotten a little bit more simple.
And then question number 3: is there somebody you've met or been in your life that has set a good example for you in aging? Someone that's inspired you to age abundantly?
Yeah, I think my dad is certainly someone who tries to age abundantly, in terms of staying active in his work, continue learning, his own health, and his support for others around him. I think he's a great example for that, and I love working with him. Yeah,
That is awesome. Well, Ryan, look, I got to thank you. I mean, you've given our listeners a lot to think about. You've given me a lot to think about. Thank you for taking the time to be on the podcast today. And thank you, our listeners, for listening to this episode of The Art of Aging, which is part of the Abundant Aging podcast series from United Church Homes. And we want to hear from you. What do you think about this idea of a brain gym, this idea of neuroplasticity, or this idea of dual tasking exercise? Let us know. AbundantAgingPodcast.com. We're also on YouTube under United Church Homes. Please go on there and subscribe. And you can also give us feedback. Plug for our Ruth Frost Parker Center, our annual symposium in October, both in Columbus and online. This will be on top of the topic of ending ageism. And Ryan, we know brainhealthtrainer.com, but once more, where can people find you?
yeah, they can find me on Instagram at Glatt, GLATT.brainhealth, or on LinkedIn under Ryan Glatt.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks to the listeners. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.